Hey everyone, welcome to Product Momentum. I'm Sean Murray, Director of Product Management here at ITX.
And I'm Dan Sharp, a Product Manager at ITX. It's our privilege to continue the Product Momentum journey, a platform that celebrates the thinkers and doers who are shaping the future of software development.
That's right, Dan. Our goal is to introduce you to industry leaders, innovators, and practitioners, and bring you their insights, advice, and innovations. We talk with experts from product strategy, UX research and design, security, engineering, leadership, and more. We'll discuss how their approaches to problems help empower teams and build trust. And we'll explore trends, tools, and techniques that your team can use to deliver the software solutions your users need today. So tune in, stay curious, and join the conversation.
You can catch us on your favorite listening platform, or if you prefer the video experience, you can find all our latest episodes on the Product Momentum YouTube channel.
And if you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share. That way, we can be sure to provide you with the best podcast experience. That was an amazing episode. We had Sophia Prater on. She is the queen of object-oriented UX. With me for this episode is John Diallo. He's from Paychex. He's a senior UX manager, and he is helping to produce some of the biggest changes in the HR tech industry. John, what did you think about that episode?
So I've been following object-oriented UX, OUX for a couple of years now, and I've been really excited to put more of it into practice. And just sitting down and hearing Sophia's passion about this is just fantastic. Whole episode, every step along the way, just reinforces good structure, good organization gives you good design on the outcomes, and that good design leads to really great experiences. So it was fantastic. Love it. Can't wait.
Sophia's energy is amazing. If you don't know what object-oriented UX is, the next 25 minutes are for you. Let's get after it. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Product Momentum. I am Sean Murray, and I am here today with Sophia Prater. She is the CEO at Rewired UX, the creator of the object-oriented UX certification, and the host of her own object-oriented UX podcast. So we are crossing streams here. This is great. She has consulted for and trained teams for all the top players in the game, and we're really excited to learn about object-oriented UX from Sophia today. Hi, Sophia.
Hello, happy to be here.
Awesome. We also have a special co-host today. So John Diallo is a senior UX manager at Paychex. He's passionate about creating amazing design, and John has his own YouTube channel and is currently publishing his own articles on Medium. John, thank you for being here today.
It is awesome to be here. I've been excited about this for a while now. So
yes, this is going to be a great conversation. Looking forward to it. First, though, for our users, or for our, users of the podcast, Sophia, give us an intro into what object-oriented UX is and why it's important.
Yeah. So OUX is simply a philosophy for doing digital product design that respects the fact that people think in objects. There's a lot of good research on this, on how the brain works, how we process information, how we understand. And basically, nouns are way easier than verbs for people. You can see this in your kids, right? If you have kids, what words do you teach them first? You teach them the nouns first, all right? We can see this in how languages are built. We can see this actually in our own perception. When we walk into a place, the back of the brain, the visual cortex, and even goes for people with sight impairments, the visual cortex is scanning the environment, and it's trying to figure out what are the things and where are the things. And how are those things related to each other? All right. And how do I relate to those things? Okay. This is all very tacit. And this happens when we go into physical environments. This is how our brains evolved, trying to survive in places. What are the things here? Are they dangerous? Is anything going to eat me? Can I eat anything? And we bring this same thinking when we go to digital environments. We do. Our brain doesn't say, oh, this is a digital environment. I'm going to process this environment completely differently than how I have been processing environments for thousands and thousands, if not millions and millions of years. So object-oriented UX says, hey, people think in objects. Let's make our systems, our digital systems, let's make it really, really clear to our end users what the objects are. Let's make sure our labels are clear. Let's make sure that they look the same in the same places, right? That we don't have these things that we call shapeshifters, where you have the same object that changes shape as it changes context. It makes it very, very difficult for people to process this information, right? So knowing that this is how the human brain works, let's honor that so that when I go into a space, it's the objects that I would expect in that space. So this is a lot of mental model work. So if I'm a teacher and I'm going into some sort of application to help me with my students, all right, I'm going to expect things like students and classes and assignments and lessons and tests. These are just the things in my mental model. And I'm going to expect to see them there. And I'm going to expect those to have the relationships that they have in the real world as well. So I have students that are inside of classes. I have a student that might have many classes. I have a class that has many students. We can get into cardinality here. And the bonus is this is how your developers are thinking like this too, all right? They're thinking in databases. They're thinking about object structures. So developers and the entire kind of tech industry really has a lot of object-oriented roots, all right? And so object-oriented UX is kind of saying, hey, designers, we can be thinking like this too. It's going to help us communicate with our developers. It's going to help us build more naturally intuitive systems. And it's actually going to help us internally, like as a team, because if we don't understand what the objects are internally, if we don't have a good shared language on what the things are, then how are we going to make it clear to our end users? And when you have a very complex system with dozens, if not hundreds of objects or concepts in these enterprise systems that I'm often working with, and you don't get really, really clear on what the things are, then it's going to be difficult to communicate within your team. So for example, when I was working with, let's say, a large airline based out of Atlanta, working with them on some B2B software, complex B2B software, we were having conversations on what's the difference between a flight, a segment, a trip, a leg, right? All these words getting used interchangeably, which is fine in like colloquial language. But if we're trying to build complex software, we got to get clear on that. So this is about creating a shared language so that you can communicate better with your team. You can work better cross-functionally to build more naturally intuitive software. And it's an absolute beautiful thing. It makes everything easier.
That's awesome. So I hear you saying it's a lot about organization, making sure we're getting our terms right, making sure we understand what the things are in the real world and how they map to the system. So one of my first questions is, you mentioned working with engineers, developers, architects, people who are very technical. What do you see the difference between how developers and engineering might do object-oriented thinking versus the way user experience designers or product designers might do object-oriented thinking?
Yeah, that's a great question because um, 99 out of 100 developers that you introduce them to OUX, they're going to be like, why haven't we always been working like this? Like, yeah, of course. Like, please, I will be really, really happy to not have to reverse engineer your screens to figure out the data model. Like, that's great. Let's work on this together. So when we can make the data model user-centered, right? So we actually are preventing a lot of tech debt, right? Because we're creating this like foundational, it's almost like belief system on what we're actually building. And it's built into the code, it's built into the data structure, and then we can build upon it, which is a gorgeous thing. We can work on it together. We're bringing the developers in earlier, which of course they're all asking to be brought in earlier so that they can also inform us on the wacky stuff that we're doing, right? So they don't have to be like, that's going to take us 6 months. Or that's going to be really, really difficult. So we can bring them in earlier. They want that. We want that. Now we have a way to bring them in earlier. The big piece of like feedback or like kind of like backhanded compliment that I've gotten on OUX is like, you're kind of taking the fun part of my job away, which is like, but they say that, tongue in cheek, right? Of but it's really good that we're doing this together. But this kind of modeling part, like this is the really fun part from the development process. But like, yes, this is great that we're doing it together, and makes sense that from a certain extent in the beginning parts of that, it should be led by a UX designer or a product designer or product manager. Content designer too. Content people are great to lead this process as well. When they are coming into the process, we need to make it very, very clear some terminology things. Like what we call objects, I use the philosopher term of an object. They might call them classes, all right? So there's a little bit of like terminology that we want to say, like, okay, you call these classes when you think of, and they sometimes call them objects too. And then objects are sometimes called instances. So like, what's an instance? What's an object? How do we actually define an object too? Because they are also going to have way more objects than we would have. So we're looking at the user-facing objects that users would actually see. All right, so we are modeling a mental model, and it's very, very clear. We need to make it very, very clear that we are not dictating execution from a technical standpoint.
Yep.
Right? So I'll bring in some technical concepts, like we talk about junction objects a lot, basically where the relationship between two things has data as well.
Mhm.
So we create like, okay, this object in context of this other object gets these attributes. So a developer might call that a join table, and they're going to have way more join tables. Like basically every single many-to-many relationship is probably has some sort of join table, and they might not even be using traditional object-oriented programming. They might be using the new something, functional programming, stream programming, something like that. So, like, to be very clear, like, I'm not telling you how you need to actually execute on the development of this. You are the expert on that. And we are really just thinking about the user-facing objects, the objects that users see and care about. And you will have probably 10x as many objects to actually implement this thing.
Yeah. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. So for OOUX, we're really thinking on what's the user going to see, really that front of house, front of stage experience. And it's not necessarily saying for developers, hey, this is how you need to implement it, but it gives them all of the architecture of how the user's thinking, that modeling, so they can sort of align those backend processes then and the backend modeling so that it actually works together seamlessly. There's not a lot of reverse engineering and, to your point, tech debt that needs to be undone later.
Yes, and I will say we have developers in our community that will use the OOUX, like the object maps, all our artifacts, the beautiful color-coded sticky notes. They will use that to map out the full implementation architecture. Like
Got it.
it scales beautifully to that. So if you want to do that, or what you could even do with like, we really want to nerd out here. If we're using something like Airtable or Notion to document this, and you can give your objects not only like the front end metadata and core content, but also back end metadata and core content, you can start labeling objects as user facing versus back end
Got it.
objects. And you could
That's
just
cool.
filter your view for just user facing or expand it out to all of the objects. Because likely every user facing object is also going to be a object that the developers are going to care about. They're just going to have a lot more.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things that, I've seen over my years just being both a designer and now doing a lot of design leadership is organization is very, very important. And one of the drums that I have been beating, if you read any of my articles or seen any of my videos or been on my team ever, you'll hear me talk about organization and information architecture. Make sure we understand what's the information we're actually dealing with and presenting to the user. So I'm kind of curious, can you help me understand a little bit how do you see the relationship between object-oriented UX and the practice of information architecture? And like, how do they fit together? Do they? Does one replace the other? Like, what is that relationship?
No, that definitely OUX does not replace information architecture. I'll tell a funny story though of like my naivety early on, and I'll give a shout out to Abby Covert, who set me straight on this. But my first workshop at the Information Architecture Summit back in
Mhm.
2015, I was watching a lot of Orange is the New Black at that time. And so I named my workshop OUX is the new IA. Like,
Mhm.
just like, 'cause I also didn't realize I didn't know exactly what information
Mhm.
picture was at that point. So it was very like, I was just being cute. And Abby was like, I don't know how well that's gonna go over actually. So I just I renamed it. So, and I've come a long way in the last 10 years and absolutely not. Like what object-oriented UX helps you do is it helps you to identify areas where you need detailed information architecture.
Mhm.
Okay, so when we think about our little pink sticky notes, we get into
Mhm.
color coding, which is where we put metadata. So I might have we put our objects on blue, and I might have an object like event. All right, so let's think about, we talking about the ITX conference? Are we
Oh,
referencing?
yeah, absolutely.
So we might say, okay, we have an event at the ITX conference, okay? And we have tons of events, all right?
Mhm.
And on a little so we put that on a blue sticky note, event, all right? And then on a pink sticky note, we put type. It's gonna have type. And in the beginning, when we're running an OUX session, we're like, okay, well, there's like a speaker session, there's a workshop, like there's a happy hour, there's probably some other types of like I might just put a few of those types of events.
Got it.
But let's say we really wanna, like, dig into that actual taxonomy of that, and maybe
Mhm.
there's even multiple tiers of taxonomy. of that. And we can say, oh, we need a lot more information architecture here. Or we have like speaker as an object, and we might want to say like speaker expertise, and we want some sort of like tag cloud or something like that, right? So we'll just kind of pinpoint all of these areas like, need taxonomy work here, need structural work here. So OUX, I feel like, is this like macro thing that gets us into some of the detailed information architecture work, but gives a really, and this is true, I think, of how OUX has been, how when people go through my programs, what they say OUX does for them is it gives a backbone for all these other disciplines to hang on to. So it really
Got it.
supports everything else. So it supports your content strategy, it supports your marketing, it brings it all together, but it's not replacing it. It's just kind of giving a nice, strong foundational backbone to all of those pieces. So I'm very, very clear. This is not a new process. This is a thing that you can add to your existing processes that make them easier, that support them, that make those practices much stronger and more effective in the long
I
run.
I love that. I love that. I love that it's you're almost thinking of it like it's another set of tools in your tool belt. It's not going to replace disciplines like information architecture has been around forever. But I love these tools, and I can see the benefit in when you get your map clear of what are the objects you're dealing with. All of a sudden, like you said, things start to shine and pop. The relationships between things are much more clear. You can figure out almost from just your object map which things are going to interact, how are you going to have calls to action between them. And so all of a sudden now it's much more organized and it can move faster.
Yes.
So, all
So
right,
one other quick example of that.
go ahead.
Well, we need to just quickly talk about the Orca process because that's the how.
Got
So
it.
Orca is objects, relationships, CTAs, and attributes.
Mhm.
Okay. So what you just mentioned, the CTAs, the calls to action, in the same way that this Orca process, the how of the
Mhm.
philosophy of OUX, lots of acronyms flying around, but the Orca, which is this like beautiful end to end process of figuring out what your objects, relationships, CTAs, and attributes are, it also will help you figure out what your interaction design is going to be. It doesn't do the interaction design for you, though, but it gives you this inventory of here's all the calls to action on the objects. And now all of a sudden, my interaction design is so much stronger because it's prioritized, it's well directed, it's linked back into the object that is being acted upon. So it just makes our interaction design so much clearer and yeah, and more effective in the same way that it does that for information architecture.
I love it. That was sort of like floating in my brain of like, I can see a map and I want to plot the paths between the maps. And that feels a lot like, you know, interaction design because you're trying to figure out how do you choreograph somebody moving through all of that. So I think it's a great way of explaining how it relates to some of those other really important disciplines.
Hey, let's take a quick break from our conversation to bring you the latest updates from the ITX Product and Design Conference. This year is going to be the best yet. Conference will be here before we know it, June 25th and 26th at the Rochester Riverside Convention Center here in Rochester, New York. The speaker list is tremendous. Day 1 will have exciting and informative product and design workshops. Day 2 is keynote day with Usha Iyer, Ioana Telianu, Sophia Prater, and Matt LeMay. And our friend Mike Balsito is going to be coming back this year to MC the event, so we know it's going to be fun and energetic. And when Mike takes the stage, there's going to be over 300 product people like you in the audience. Keynote Day is a unique blend of product and design content that really has no equal in the conference setting. It's going to be an amazing day where you, outside of the keynote presentations, will be able to choose your own adventure and see spotlight sessions, work with your colleagues, and get to see live podcast recordings with Dan and I, where you get to participate and be the one who drives the questions. It's going to be an amazing day. If you want to see more information about the Product and Design Conference, go to itx.com/conference 2025. That's itx.com/conference 2025. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Let's do it. I have a quick selfish product question, right? So how does object-oriented UX translate into something that product can use to help understand like the user journey and help actually start breaking down their requirements and doing their part of the work.
Yes. So I've got a lot of PMs using object-oriented UX actually as it creates a beautiful PRD for you. So it is a way of organizing a PRD by objects, a product requirements document. So a journey map, depending on how high level it is, okay? Because I've seen lots of journey maps, and some of them are very, like, true journey maps, and sometimes they're a little bit more task flow-like, okay? So if we really are at that kind of jobs to be done, very, like, high level, this is how somebody flows through the transformation that they're trying to create, not necessarily through an existing product, all right? So you have, like, how do I work through an existing solution? We can definitely look at that for sure. Or, like, how am I, like, trying to just, get from point A to point B? We can take all of that, and that becomes an input into the Orca process. So one of the first things we do in Orca, this is like one of the benefits that I've heard people say is like, now I always know how to start a project. But before it's kind of like, I get really overwhelmed by everything and there's so much here. Like, now I always know where to start. And that's with noun foraging. So I can take all of the stuff in, and a lot of that is task flows, journey maps, screens that maybe a PM has sketched out or something like that, some loose requirements even, and I can start looking at the nouns. I can start seeing the nouns that come up over and over and over again. And this noun foraging really kind of evolves when you become more of an expert at it. It's really language foraging. You're looking for verbs too. You're looking at adjectives because adjectives are usually metadata. So we can take all of that mess, if you will, because it's usually lots of documentation, and pull it into figuring out what the nouns are. So when we go through that and when we start figuring out, okay, what are O's, our objects, what are R's, our relationships, what are our C's, our CTAs, what are A's, our attributes, we basically have a map of the user experience. But what we've done is we have objectified all of those elements. We haven't just objectified the objects. We've objectified the relationships between the objects, which is a beautiful thing. We've objectified the tasks, the CTAs, which we do that with like user stories and such. But we also objectified the parts of the objects, the individual attributes. And once we've objectified all of those things and concretized them, and we have a little box around them, we can write requirements on those things. And this is an amazing thing. So we have structures for writing the back-end requirements on every object. What is the privacy we need to have for this object? What are the permissions on this object? Who owns these objects, right? Does the user own the data around these objects? Do they not own the data? What kind of messaging do we need to show around that? So we can create all this back-end documentation on the objects, but also on the relationships. What is the mechanics? How do these objects connect to each other? Is it an API that it's at? Literally, we can get into the mechanics of those relationships. We can talk about the dependencies. All right, well, if somebody deletes an instance of this, do the nested objects get deleted too? So we can document that as well because we've objectified the relationship between the two objects. We can go into every single attribute. Say, is this required field? Is this not a required field? What's the max character length? We can go into that level of detail. And yeah, it creates a really nice color-coded, easy to navigate, beautiful PRD. A PRD that people will actually love.
I just like that we get the opportunity to add another acronym in. I think we can get to at least 2 more before we're done. So
Yes, we've got 3 at least right now.
At least 3.
Awesome.
I'll give you one more right now, and that's our requirements for the way that we write requirements for relationships. We talk about well, it's more of a mnemonic than an acronym, but it's my cat saving fire department, and that is mechanics, cardinality, sorts, filters, and dependency. And we write all of that just on every single relationship, or the most important relationships.
I like it.
That's awesome. Those details are like oftentimes when you're in the middle of a project and you run into one of those details unexpectedly, product, I can hear you already saying, well, that's where my scope starts to balloon and we can't do that. And for UX, oh, that's a whole new flow that we didn't account for. Well, we don't really have time for that. So I can already start to see the benefits of getting a lot of this out on the table early. We've already talked about like tech debt. We've talked about making sure product requirements are clear. I still feel like there might be some skeptics. They might hear this and say, all right, this is a lot of extra work. this feels like I'm going to have to slow down to do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
What other additional benefits do we really need to be thinking about that we might be missing where, making sure that we slow down before we hit that curve so we can speed up and really get at speed going around the turn with OUX? How else do we need to think about that? I mean, we need to ship screens now.
Yeah.
OUX is not screens.
No, you need to ship. I will correct you. You need to ship good screens now.
Okay. Tell me more.
All right. I mean, go all day. Just ship some screens,
Mhm.
right? I mean, is that going to get you your promotion? Is that going to make users happy just to ship a quantity of screens? And this is to bring up capitalism just a little bit. This is what we do. Ship, 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 right? That we just say like, because it's like we're quantifying these things. Instead of, can we ship one screen that people freaking love that does the job of 20 screens, right? Like, isn't that better actually? Isn't that actually even faster, less to maintain instead of putting a bunch, because every feature that you put out, it's really hard to take it away.
Mhm.
Really hard to take it away. All right. Because then you got the one person using it, and then you got to maintain it and everything. So, but what I will say is, often the fastest way to get somewhere is slow. And sometimes we need to slow down to speed up. And you will, like, good luck designing something that people actually love, that really fits into their mental model, that really fits into their life, that really creates something that the entire team can have shared pride around, which is a really important thing. Like, teams coming together, delivering something that they're all proud of. Okay. That is an absolutely beautiful thing. Right. And something that people actually love. When we, to finish my thought, good luck designing that if you do not understand it. All right. So at the end of the day, I like to say that the Orca process is a tool for understanding. Let's just understanding the scope, making sure our scope is really clear, understanding what the mental model is, understanding what the data structure is, understanding what the technical constraints are, understanding all of the constraints. All right. Understanding even not just our particular product, but the domain that our product sits in. So we don't create a solution that creates 18 other problems in this world. Right? So we are truly becoming systems thinkers. That this is what the world needs, right? We don't need a bunch of designers shipping screens. Like, the world does not need that. Okay? And we want to create, I'm getting a little heated now, but we don't want to be creating, right? Just a bunch of screens. We want to be creating real solutions that actually solve problems that take into context a wider system, to understand that our system is inside of a system of systems. So we need people thinking in systems. And that is what the Orca process gives you. It gives you this way to do systems thinking, really practical way to come together collaboratively to do systems thinking. And the cool thing is it actually makes you go faster. And it actually makes you understand the stuff that you don't need to do. Because when you lay it all on the table, and I can bring you some quotes of people saying this happening, of, oh my gosh, the amount of time that it saved us and just getting everything out on the table, looking at all the puzzle pieces collaboratively, making sure we understand the purpose of all these puzzle pieces. We say, we don't even need half of this stuff. This stuff is just going to drag us down. It's not going to give us momentum as a company. And that can make you go so much faster. You can then concentrate your efforts on the really meaningful stuff and do it with full understanding. And then you're going to avoid so much rework at
I love
the
it.
end of the day
And
because you're actually understanding what you're doing.
I love it. I think that's one of the greatest things that I have seen. So we've sort of been tinkering with OUX and practices, and we've had some training on it internally. And as we've seen it deployed on our projects, we have seen exactly that, is that we don't spin our wheels and waste our time on the things we ought not do. And what it does is it aligns everybody sort of around that common goal so that we can all get to value delivery more streamlined. And that's been for us, in my experience, it's satisfied that need for me to see teams organizing without getting stalled into details of organizing, because you can kind of get too into the weeds, but it's a nice balance of making sure everyone knows what's up, know what we're doing, so we can focus on that value delivery. So it's been great.
Can I read a quote real quick?
Yes.
Carolyn, this is from Carolyn Sober James, and she's one of our star OUXers. And she was working at an agency called Acumium at the time. large agency doing big projects, and she's had a client that they came in and they needed some custom software in 7 weeks. And she says, custom complex software built top to tail in 7 weeks thanks to OUX. OUX is a failure rate of exactly 0% across every project I'd use it on, regardless of how much the methodology I've been able to apply. So that's the other thing. It's scalable too. And because they were able to spend, I think they spent like 2 days in workshops with the client doing the object map, getting the requirements really,
That's
really
awesome.
clear and the scope really, really clear. The other thing is developers were able to get started on that while screens were being built. So developers and designers can be singing from that same sheet of music, and designers are no longer a bottleneck. So developers, because they were in that session, they were able to say, oh, I can go ahead and start working on that data structure. I can go ahead and start working on that API. I can go ahead and start cleaning up that database over there that we need to pull over while the screens are being built. And then they get the screens and they're like, yeah, cool. That's what we talked about. The screens aren't like, oh, left field, it hit me like a ton of bricks, right? And now we got to refactor the screens to make it work with what we've got. The developers are like, yeah, cool, okay, we're ready for that.
I love it. I love it. I
Go
think
really
it's a great
smoothly.
explanation.
Sophia, I am so excited to have you at the ITX Product and Design Conference coming up this the end of this month, June 25th and 26th at the Rochester Riverside Convention Center. We are going to have an awesome time.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot at that conference. I'm all over that conference.
Yep.
Come see me there. Got a workshop. I got a talk. I got a panel.
Yeah, we're basically not going to let you leave. I think that's
I'll be at the happy hours.
welcome to
Run
Rochester.
out. Yes, I'm very excited.
Awesome. I have some takeaways for our crew on the for our crew listening today. So one thing that I thought we talked about early, and we didn't necessarily say this exactly, but I thought that one of the beautiful things about object-oriented UX is that it breaks down practice silos early,
Mhm.
right? So early on in the process, everybody can get aligned quicker, right? So I thought that was one great takeaway. I also liked you talked about the reuse of artifacts. People don't like to produce something that only works for one part of the process. If we're creating something that can be used by product and by engineering, right? And it is something that everybody's going to get value from. The time spent becomes that much more valuable. I really liked your Abby story, and I like just the idea of like maybe I should test out this idea. But also, not only did you test out the idea with Abby, you also received the feedback well. So kudos to you. I thought that object-oriented UX has the opportunity to take kind of like loose requirements and really creates real understanding of the relationships between system objects. So that was great. One thing that as we got into the shipping screens conversation, I could see both of you cringing a little bit. It feels like shipping screens is like the UX version of how many lines of code has AI written for your company.
Yeah, or can you make it pop?
Yeah.
There's a visual designer. Can you just make
Okay.
four screen?
And then object-oriented UX is not slowing down. It's really a new way to start, right? It's a new way to start, but also by starting that way, and you said you understand what you don't need to do. This is something that's going to end up reducing waste significantly in the future of your project, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Last question is, we ask this of all the people that come on the podcast. What are you reading today? What's on your nightstand?
Okay. So what's on my nightstand? Well, I'll give one shameless plug real quick is I am reading my own book.
Nice.
So that is out X-Ray UX, OUX.com/X-Ray UX. You can get on the wait list there. It's going to be out soon. So I'm doing a final read through of the book that I've been working on for the last 5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a labor of love with a lot of help, team effort for sure. But we're getting great feedback on that as well. So if you're more of a reader than like watching course videos or something, that is going to be available very, very soon, maybe by the time this episode comes out. I am also reading Heather Hayden's book that I picked up at the Information Architecture Conference on the accidental taxonomist. So I'm learning a lot more about taxonomy and seeing how that plugs into OUX. I am also reading a book. It's basically a bunch of video transcripts called Dynamic Neural Retraining System. So it's just a friend of mine gave me this. He was like, "You'd be interested in this. It's fascinating." It's about how it's a training program for people that have these chemical sensitivities that basically it's a It's brain science, so it's interesting to me. And I'm sure there's some application to OUX, but it's where there's been a injury to the limbic system. So the limbic system is in this loop. So the tiniest bit of chemical will send somebody into a spiral. Fibromyalgia is similar to this, or people that have the electromagnetic problems where they literally have to like go live in the woods and they have a program to basically retrain your limbic system, to retrain the associations. So it's like very scientific manifestation of retraining your actual brain. So I am reading that, and I am working my way through Within Who Run with the Wolves as well. The
Nice.
classic. Yeah.
Nice. I always like when people mix in both like the professional and the, your actual leisure time reading. That's great. Also, what your second book that you're reading, it really, it made me wonder if I'm reading the right things. That's like the big book that I'm reading right now is I'm reading the third Harry Potter book to my 6-year-old. Well, like that's where I'm at.
Right.
Also a good book.
Finishing Matt LeMay's
I mean,
book, reading one of Luke Stiles' recommendations, but also the third Harry Potter book.
okay, so I'm working on, I should say. We are playing with the fifth Red Rising book right now on Audible. So I am listening to that on Audible, and we're probably about to start the eighth Dungeon Crawler Carl lit RPG book. So
Awesome.
I got my nerdy sci-fi in there too. Don't you worry.
Excellent.
Don't you worry.
Excellent.
I'm having fun, but I do love the nerdy books on how the brain works. It's really fun for me.
That's awesome. All right, John, you're hired. You're coming back. Number one reason is not just because John was great today on the podcast, but also because I explained in our pre-production call how sensitive I was because I was the only one without a cool microphone, and John hated his microphone today, knowing that I would not have the cool microphone in the shot today. So, John, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
You're awesome. We really look forward to seeing you in Rochester for the Product and Design Conference. Thank you so much for being here today.
Amazing. I am excited to be there and and meet some new future OUXers
Awesome.
and existing OUXers.
Well, that's it for today. In line with our goals of transparency and listening, we really want to hear from you. Sean and I are committed to reading every piece of feedback that we get, so please leave a comment or a rating wherever you're listening to this podcast. Not only does it help us continue to improve, but it also helps the show climb up the rankings so that we can help other listeners move, touch, and inspire the world just like you're doing. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next episode.